Okay, I'm going to officially welcome everyone. My name is Brina Holmes. I'm a pediatrician. I work for the Vermont Department of Health, and I'm also here representing the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Vermont chapter. And we, as a group of pediatricians, are super committed to the dialogue and conversation that we want to have with families about the opportunity to have children 12 and up vaccinated against COVID-19 right now. And we are so grateful that the Rutland community has found Elliot Rubin. So Dr. Rubin practiced in New Jersey for many years, but he wanted to make sure everyone knew that he actually did go to medical school here. And he now lives in Rutland. And he has generously offered to take us through some slides. We have some PowerPoint information just about where we are in Vermont right now with COVID and the vaccine opportunity. And then we have tons of time for question and answer. We really want to hear from you what's going on in your thoughts and decisions. And it's a small enough group, we can do it through chat or we can do it verbally. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to thank Patrick, our incredible American Sign Language interpreter who's been with us through these forums, and Margaret Dooley. I hope many of you know her, public health nurse in the Rutland District Office for our public health system. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rubin. Welcome.
Well, welcome. Thank you, Brina. And I also want to thank Stephanie Winters and the American Academy of Pediatrics for giving me this opportunity to speak with you all this evening about COVID vaccine and the youth of Vermont. I'm going to start with a few slides. And let's see. Basically, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so I would just like to welcome you all again and go over some of the objectives. First of all, we're going to do a brief overview of COVID in children and give you some information about COVID in Vermont. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the mental health concerns in children and adolescents, and we're going to give we're going to have a brief video from our chapter president, Rebecca Bell. And we'll give a little bit more information on the vaccine, and then we'll have plenty of time for question and answers. First thing I want to tell you is basically looking at, you know, several times a week, the state gives out information about all the statistics. And one of the things that you can note on this one is that these are the latest cases. And if you look, it's skewing towards the younger population. As a matter of fact, the 10 to 19-year-olds are the second highest. So that is basically good news that we're, you know, that our older populations are vaccinated, but we still have to get this vaccine going so that we can flatten the curve even on the left-hand side. This is also showing that same thing, but basically these are the COVID cases in school-age children, and just this curve breaks it out just a little bit, telling you what's happening in the different schools. There's a little bump up in the last week or so, probably more community-based rather than anything going on at the schools. So I would like to take a minute to just read this slide from Catherine Luton. She's a student, just wrote a really eloquent comment about what's going on. And so we have Zoom, Google Meet, FaceTime, and every other form of video service at our fingertips, but we don't have a true connection. There is no replacement for the smiles in the hallway, the feeling of winning playoff games, and the satisfaction of knowing the correct answer. We want to be kids, but the pandemic has forced us to grow. We are still young, but we feel so aged by all we have been dealt. We want to cry about all we're missing as we're still just kids trying to cope, but we also know that we are grateful for our health and safety. We feel guilty, relieved, and completely terrified. We're big kids, we can handle the truth, but we also want our loved ones to hold us tight and tell us it will be all right. We miss our lives. We miss just being kids. And this is just a reminder, and I know I don't have to tell you all because you're living this, but our kids have been isolated and they're really at risk for anxiety, for depression. And you should keep that really on your radar. I want you to know that, your pediatric provider has been trained in mental health, and you can reach out to them for any issues on this. They can schedule a special visit just for that, or, even at a well visit, even if your teen hasn't been expressing this to you, we have questionnaires that we can give them to elicit if there's a problem. So now we have a message from our AAP chapter president, Becca Bell.
Hi there, I'm Becca Bell. I'm a pediatrician in Burlington and the current president of the Vermont chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Hi there, I'm Becca Bell. I'm a pediatrician in Burlington and the current president of the Vermont chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I'm just going to take a few moments to talk about how excited we are as pediatricians that the COVID-19 vaccine is available for young people now. So I'm a pediatric intensivist, which means I take care of children in the pediatric intensive care unit at UVM Children's Hospital. And I take care of infants, children, and adolescents who are critically ill or injured. And so vaccines are something that have always been really important to me because they help prevent a lot of the very serious illness I sometimes see in the ICU when children are too young or haven't been vaccinated against a vaccine preventable infection. And when I think back to last spring, when everything was shutting down and I was working with some of my other ICU colleagues who care for adults, and we were really worried about the number of ventilators and the number of hospital beds. If you had told me then a year ago that we would have a number of safe and effective vaccines that in trials, when tested on tens of thousands of people, prevented people from not just dying, but even becoming seriously ill enough to even be in the hospital, I don't know if I would have believed it. It's amazing how effective these vaccines are. And a lot of people are wondering, how are we able to get these vaccines so quickly? It seems like quite a feat. And, in pediatrics, we're used to vaccines taking a little bit longer. And part of that is that there's a lot of competing interests in terms of what type of research and technology gets funded, right? Lots of competing interests there. And when we test vaccines on other types of infections, usually those infections aren't as common, aren't as prevalent. And so it takes a while to get all that data. But with COVID-19, as we all know, the world stopped last spring, just completely stopped. And the biggest priority that everyone had in the world was stopping this virus. And what that meant really was having safe and effective vaccines. That became the top priority. And so every effort was turned towards that. All this funding was turned towards that. And a ton of collaboration happened in order to make this possible. So I want to talk a little bit about the vaccines that you all qualify for, are eligible for, or will be soon. And that's the messenger RNA vaccine. So that's the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. So this is a technology that's been in use in cancer therapies, and also scientists have been using it to study vaccines for other infections. And so when the world was told what the SARS-CoV-2 virus looked like, that was something that was shared with everyone, people got to work. And so they used this technology that already existed, and they made it applicable to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And because there was so much funding going towards this, they were able to make this happen on a little bit of a quicker timeline than usual, but all the steps were there. They went through every single step. And because COVID-19 is so prevalent, when they did the efficacy trials to see if it worked, and they gave vaccine to some people and a placebo to other people, they saw very quickly that the people who received the vaccine weren't getting sick. from COVID-19, and the people who didn't receive it were getting sick. And that data was collected so quickly that they were able to get a pretty definitive answer that these vaccines are really effective. And one thing that I think is so interesting about the mRNA vaccine is that it really gives your body instructions for how to make a protein that looks like what's on the virus. So what do I mean by that? So when you get the vaccine, this mRNA is like a little piece of instruction, or I almost think about it like a handwritten recipe that's sort of passed down in your family, right? You have a piece of paper with a recipe, and then these are instructions. And your cells can make, based on the instructions, can make a spike protein with that. Then once it's made, recipe goes away, and the mRNA, it just kind of disintegrates and disappears. And then what you have is this harmless spike protein that's not the virus, but is similar enough that your immune system can look at it, recognize it, and get ready for it in case they ever see the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And this is really important because this is what will stop the virus from replicating throughout your body if you're exposed to SARS-CoV-2 and making you very sick. One of the things we know in intensive care medicine is that these viruses, SARS-CoV-2 in particular, the virus itself can cause a problem in your body. It can cause direct injury and illness. But the other problem is on the other end, when your immune system is trying to fight off that virus, that battle that happens can create a ton of inflammation and a lot of problems and a lot of illness. So it's that back and forth between it's the virus and your immune system. When you get exposed to the virus, when you get sick, that can make you really sick. Now, in someone who's been vaccinated, instead their body sees the virus and their immune system's already ready. They already have the antibodies. They recognize it really quickly before the virus can kind of get out of hand. And they've got the cells ready that they know they need to fight off this virus. And that's why people aren't getting very sick. They're not dying. And if anything, they might have a mild cold after being vaccinated. And that is what's so amazing, is that these vaccines give your cells this recipe for how to create this spike protein. Your body then, your immune system then learns it, understands it, recognizes it, and gets ready for it. So when the first authorization happened, first with Pfizer in December, I was one of the lucky ones to get vaccinated pretty early. And as you can imagine, there were lines of doctors and nurses and other healthcare providers who were just so excited to get this vaccine. I mean, it was emotional. I felt emotional getting the vaccine for the first time, knowing that I was protecting my body. And then I got my second shot in January and had the expected, many people kind of feel crummy the next day because they have that, they can sense their immune system sort of recognizing again this spike protein and sort of revving up for it. And then felt fine after a day. And it's just been so amazing seeing my rest of my family and my friends and my colleagues and everyone I love getting vaccinated. My own children are too young right now. They don't qualify, but I am going to be so relieved and so grateful when the vaccines are approved for their age group, and they will be first in line. So I just wanted to spend a moment just to really let everyone know that, we're living in this really, really challenging time. This virus has really wreaked havoc directly and indirectly, and it's affected all of us. But there is this really bright spot, and that is these vaccines they're really effective, and they're really doing what we want them to do, which is to keep us from getting sick. And we really want you to ask questions. If you have questions about the vaccine, we're here for you. Pediatricians are really excited that the people we love, our patients, are going to get vaccinated soon. And we're happy to walk you and your family through this process and work towards getting our communities healthy and getting back to doing all the stuff that we love doing. So thank you so much for listening, and please feel free to reach out to your pediatrician and reach out to us, and we're happy to work with you on this. Take care.
Well, thank you, Becca, and thank you for both giving a great explanation and for really expressing the emotion that we all feel about this vaccine and about everybody getting it, and especially about our newest population of young people getting it. So you may ask, why vaccinate your teen? Parents may have their own reasons, get kids back to school. They won't have to quarantine if they get exposed. Kids have their own reasons, they can go back to being normal, have freedom. And these are all true, but there's another reason, is this is not a virus that anybody should want to get or get. You really should do everything you can to not get this virus. And it's true that kids don't get, they may not get as sick or get it as much as adults, but they can get sick, and they can, certainly get it. They can maybe have no symptoms. Maybe they can pass it on to someone else, which is not good. And maybe they can get sick. And sometimes they get sick enough to just have, several days of fever, and that's not just completely benign either. Sometimes they can get sick enough to wind up in the hospital, and sometimes they can even die. Now, in Vermont, we've been spared that, but actually nationally, over 300 children have died from this. And I want you to know that even if you have it as a teen or as a young child, and you have a moderate illness, maybe 4 or 5 days of fever, you're going to have to actually ask your pediatrician. You're going to have to be seen and be cleared by your pediatrician and maybe even a cardiologist before you can go back to sports. So there's a lot of reasons that you should want to, get vaccinated and not get this disease. So you probably have plenty of questions, and we're going to have time for them in a little bit. We're going to give you just a little more background information. And so the vaccines, the vaccine was authorized for 16 and over. It's the same vaccine that we're talking now. That was back in 2020. And now that vaccine has been approved for 12 through 15. So basically 12 and up. So how do they work? And Becca did go over this a bit, but basically, the virus causes the disease, and the vaccine stops this by sort of revving up your immune system to make antibodies to fight it, to make your immune system recognize this virus, because it's a new virus. That's the whole problem. It's a new virus, and our bodies have never seen this. And so after the vaccine, after you get vaccinated, your child will have less chance of getting COVID-19. And even if they do get it, they may not get as sick as they would without the vaccine. And the types of vaccines are the Pfizer and Moderna, which require 2 doses. And that's the one that we mentioned is recommended or authorized for 12 to 17. And the other one is the Johnson & Johnson, which is the single shot. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine, you probably heard about it several weeks ago, where it was temporarily paused because of possible ties to blood clots. Basically, they studied that and found that that it was although it may have been tied, they weren't sure, that it was very, very rare, and that basically with just some information, they decided it was okay to go ahead, and that the potential, risk was, that the potential benefit was greater than the risk. No, and so just to reiterate, the only vaccine right now that is available for kids 12 and above is the Pfizer vaccine. So in question about how effective, they're very effective. As a matter of fact, you probably heard when these were first coming out then that they were 95%. Well, when they did the studies in this young group, the 12 to 15, it was actually 100% effective, which is incredible. And they prevent serious illness, hospitalization and death. And so, they don't know exactly how long kids will be immune, or anybody will be immune from this, but it will become clear. The thinking is that most likely it's going to be close to a year. We're not talking, the studies that I've heard and the experts that I've heard talk about this, we weren't talking about, let's say, doing another booster in the fall. I don't think that was, but they're studying, and they're basically studying for that initial group that got studied way back almost a year ago. Well, almost a year ago when they first started the studies. So is one type of vaccine better? Well, not really. I mean, you can't compare them, and there's benefits to each of them. Obviously, the one that's approved now for the age group is the one we're talking about. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is, for some people, it's better because it's basically one and done. And the other one, you do have to, the Pfizer, you have to come back for 3 weeks later, and the Moderna, you have to come back 4 weeks later for a booster. Okay. How do we know they're safe? Because they've been studied, and they're, basically remarkably safe. They have been studied, and as a matter of fact, the CDC say that this is the most intensive safety monitoring that ever done for any vaccine. So the side effects. So some people don't have any side effects. I got the Pfizer, and even with the second one, I basically had a little arm soreness. So the most common side effects are those that you see: fever, chills, headache, pain in your muscles or pain at the site, fatigue, and nausea. There is one other one, which telling you in case you see it, but you should not be alarmed, is that you can get what's called lymphadenopathy, or some swelling underneath the armpit or in the neck on the same side as you got the vaccine, and that just means that your immune system is working on basically revving up to get ready to fight this. The side effects go away after a few days. So, and you're probably aware of this from hearing this for adults, but basically it takes about 2 weeks to after the second dose of the mRNA vaccine, so the Pfizer or Moderna, for you to be considered, basically completely immunized. The J&J vaccine is also 2 weeks after that dose, although some people say out to 4 weeks. And just to reiterate, the vaccines are free. You do not have to pay whether you have health insurance or not. So, so the clinical trials have shown that the vaccine is safe and effective. And now the clinical trials are starting as young as 6 months of age. They're ongoing with Pfizer, and I believe Moderna is doing that as well. As to when those are going to come out, we don't know. It may be, what I have heard is towards the end of this year. This is not going to be with, it won't be I don't think it'll be at the end of the summer. I think those are going to be a little later. Now, also what they're doing with these younger children is they're actually studying the doses as well. As you know, the doses that the 12 and up are getting are the same as the adults have given, and that should not cause any pause. If you know that when you get a flu vaccine, even kids 6 months of age get the same dose as everyone. But they are going to be studying what the dosing is for the younger than 12. Okay, this is really good news because of all the fact that everybody has been somewhat resistant to having their normal life, and that means including going to the doctor. Some of the vaccines have had to suffer because of the usual vaccines that kids get, the Tdap, Menactra, HPV, all the vaccines that you get. So the recommendation is, and this is really big news as of basically last week, is that the AAP says you can do these with the COVID vaccine. You can do them around the COVID vaccine. So if you had it 3 days ago and you got your Tdap and now you want to get it's fine. So anything any combination of that. And this comes out of that big meeting that they had, and has support from the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics. And that's actually really a big deal, because if you remember when you all, as adults, went and got this vaccine weeks ago, hopefully, there was something that you basically were told, don't make sure you haven't had a vaccine 2 weeks before or after. But this is new. This is new, and it's a big deal. So here is basically some information on how to get the vaccine for your kids. You can basically get them by going on the healthvermont.gov My Vaccine. You can schedule them through these pharmacies. And again, there are some school-located clinics, and you should register, although I'll have it on the next slide. You can actually, some of them will have walk-in. So here's some information on that. And here's some more information. So this does talk about the fact that there are some walk-ins, but I think it's probably best that you register in advance. And remember that for students under 18, you will need parental or guardian consent. So that's something. But I will tell you, they are being incredibly flexible, because that consent can even be done over the phone, which is really terrific. And I've listed for you here the clinics and community locations in Rutland. Now this slide has actually already happened, but the next slide has coming up for the next several days. And you can either take a screenshot of this, or I actually have it listed here in the resources. You can do a screenshot of this, or I think we have this available as well. And the second link that I have there is actually that list. So if you take a screenshot of that, you can then go to that. You'll be able to get that list. But actually, if you just go onto the main website for Vermont, you'll be able to do it. And now I guess we have time for some questions and hopefully some answers.
Thank you, Dr. Rubin.
Sure.
So for those of you who joined after we got started, I'm Dr. Brina Holmes. I work at the health department, and we're a small enough group that you're welcome to come on camera, unmute, ask your questions, but I've become quite good at chat boxes over the months. So we're really here for you. Small, medium, large questions. And we're also happy to fill some time with some of our other observations or what other families have been asking us over the last 10 days. This is our 9th community town hall. We have a few more to go, but really looking forward to
I'll start it off. If there are no questions, I can start off with a common question, which is, how come this thing went so fast? I mean, that's a really common, the development of this vaccine, that seems to be something that, bothers people. And what you should know is, number one, it didn't really go that fast, because the technology of the mRNA vaccine was actually developed about 10 years ago when SARS-CoV-1 and MERS happened. And so that was sort of ready to go, and they had gotten it ready. And it was sort of like they knew that it was going to work. What they didn't know is they needed to plug in the new virus. So that should be reassuring. And the other thing is that parts of the studies were done simultaneously rather than sequentially. So they put everything, they did put it in fast gear, and but it was done, with, first of all, they got basically all the resources of all the companies ready to go with this, and they put it in fast gear, but still very, very careful in terms of the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 studies. And they were really careful. So I think that should be encouraging to people. And I will tell you that in, just in my circle, medical communities, physicians are getting it, nurses are getting it, their kids are getting it. I mean, everybody is thrilled about this. So I feel the safety and that part is just not something to worry about. It's something you can think about it, but you should be reassured.
I'd like to ask a question, if I may.
Sure.
I wonder if the data is showing any long-term effects from the vaccine, and my thought process is specifically, the immediate inflammation that your body creates. But is there any long-term inflammation or other long-term effects that they're seeing?
So they have not. I mean, again, we're talking about a vaccine that's been out for 6 to if longer if you include the studies, but there has not been any inflammation. And they really have been looking at this as well because they they want to make sure that nothing like that has happened, so or is happening. So as a matter of fact, even the children that Becca was talking about when she talked about when you get the natural disease and you have increased inflammation, and you probably have heard that term MISC, which is when you get multi-system inflammatory syndrome of children. It's when your body sort of goes crazy, sort of trying to make inflammation. Even with that, they've said that is not happening with the vaccine. So the answer is really no. There is nothing. They certainly have studied, as much as they can. They've studied this. One of the things that you all should realize is, people were concerned about the J, when there was this little pause for the J&J. You actually should think if that's an actual excellent thing that happened. Not that necessarily there was a problem, but that they were very much attuned to it. I mean, that's called a signal, when they basically said, hey, wait a minute, something is off here. And, basically, they basically said, and there were like 8 cases. I mean, think about it. There were 8 cases and they were like, how many millions of cases, but they found something that they were concerned enough. That should be very reassuring that they are really looking carefully. This is not something, that they're just like saying, oops, that was well done. I mean, people criticized it because they said maybe you shouldn't have closed it down, but it was, I actually think it was extremely well done. I will tell you something, that they are so transparent that even the meetings that they have to discuss this are actually open to the public. And I went to them, sort of half retired. So I said, I have some time. And I went to those meetings and they discussed it. And, and it was just very transparent. So that's another thing to be reassured about. I hope I'm reassuring you.
Hi, this is Erin. I just have a question as well. I was wondering, what the mRNA vaccines have been developed, are those in direct relation to the spike protein that we're seeing with this disease? Or like, why haven't we seen mRNA vaccines before? And why aren't they using the typical way, the typical vaccines that have been used in the past? So just clarification, just what kind of the mRNA is.
Right, right. And let me explain that. So the mRNA is basically a messenger RNA, and it basically goes in, it's like a very efficient way of getting information into the cell to make the spike protein. It goes in disguised in like a fat globule, basically. And it goes in, it starts telling the cell to make this spike protein, which is the protein that looks like the vaccine, that looks like the virus. Okay, you've seen these pictures of all the spikes on the COVID virus. That then tells, when it sees that spike protein, the body then starts making, antibodies. We have not used it, but as I mentioned, we did start using it 10 years ago. Those vaccines were not they weren't available here. We didn't have SARS-CoV-1 or MERS in this country, but it did start. It was a new technology, and basically they said, this is something we have ready to go if we have a problem. So that's one answer. The other answer is we are actually also the J&J vaccine is more of a typical vaccine where the instructions are basically it goes in with like a partner virus, a harmless adenovirus, which is a cold type virus. That's the vaccine vector, similar type of vaccine. So it was just a novel way to do it, and they had the technology. The other thing about this vaccine is that, let me back up a second. Some of the older vaccines, when I'm saying older, are actually, they used to, actually just take parts of even if it was from a bacteria, they would take parts of the bacteria, and and that would make the vaccine. As a matter of fact, if you remember, maybe I'm not presuming anything, but the older DTaP vaccines that date back to when my kids were younger, those vaccines were what's called dirty. They were basically too impure. The vaccines now are much more pure, and they know that the science is much more well known. So they're using the technology.
Thank you.
Sure.
And Aaron, it's Frina. I'll just add that I think you're going to see a lot more messenger RNA vaccines in the future. So they're ramping them up for things like Zika. Remember Zika virus that was a moderate or mild threat here, but moderate in other parts of the world. And they're looking at it in rabies vaccines and even changing over the way we vaccinate people about flu.
Right.
So
and
I think you're going to hear a lot about it.
One other thing I wanted to add is I think the technology is such that you can alter these a little bit and tweak them. So if you hear about variants, right now it turns out that the vaccines we have are very good with variants. But if there is a thought that maybe if things start to drift and we've got variants that are more, causing more problems, we can tweak with the mRNA technology and add another protein just to get what we want. And it's relatively easy. It may not be all that easy to do that and then, produce, 200 million of them, but, believe me, they're working on it and they're thinking about it. But it's really, the fact that we have that technology is fantastic. Any other questions? What other questions?
Hi, I'll jump in.
Sure.
I'm a parent who is not really sure what I want to do for my kiddo. I used to work for somebody who was very much against vaccinations and educated people against it. At the same point in time, that's not necessarily my opinion, but I did get like that perspective as far as my education on vaccines. So I'm trying to decide, and that's why I'm on here. And my daughter is, I think, getting a lot of pressure from kids in her class to get it. Yes. And it's becoming this cool thing to have the sticker on your phone, and she really wants to get it. And I'm just trying to educate myself more. My main question for you is, what do you think, or what is your opinion on waiting a little while longer if you are somebody who feels a little anxious in your gut about your 12, 13-year-old kiddo getting it at such an early stage? Is your opinion that it's okay to wait a while longer? Or, I live in Vermont. There isn't a lot of risk for us in our situation.
Yeah, I think you do have to feel comfortable with it. And I think that's the important thing, that you are comfortable. I think waiting is always the risk of basically you're gonna not, you're gonna get it after, you're gonna get the natural disease. And that's, as I said, that can be a problem. I mean, it could be a waiting game. I mean, in general, we have recommended, I mean, for everybody, get this now, get this taken care of. It is true that waiting, I mean, if you waited 3 months and now what was around was mostly variant that wasn't being, I mean, that could be a problem. So I would generally, again, I'm encouraging you to be, you have to feel comfortable with this. And I can give you a whole nother spiel about vaccines in general, but I can tell you, the emotion that Becca had about this vaccine. I will tell you that my kids were born just before the HIV vaccine, which is Haemophilus influenza B, which is a very, very serious bacterial illness that you guys don't know about because you've either all had the vaccine or certainly your kids have had it, hopefully. But when I was a resident, I'm going to just tell you, I was terrified that my son was going to get this, because basically a fever in a child under 2, this could be basically meningitis or death. And so as soon as that vaccine came out, and it came out in 1987, I was so thrilled at it. And there was another vaccine that came out later in 2000, which was the pneumococcus. You know all these vaccines, you might not realize them because they're part of vaccines that you just get, but those, and nobody talks about them because nobody gets them, which is terrific. Residents go through residency and have never seen these diseases. I used to be on call and every night basically doing spinal taps in the emergency room. So I'm just telling you that I'm a big proponent of vaccines, and the emotion that Becca had, I am for these. I mean, you do not, again, you don't really want to fool around with this illness. You don't know about the long-term, even if your child has a relatively mild case of it, you don't know what's going to happen 6 months, 12 months. There's long haulers with the, just as there are in adults. And so, I mean, that's my spiel. I think ultimately you should feel comfortable, and we have certainly resources, both from, this talk and online, that we can point you to help you, feel more comfortable.
Yes, Sarah, it's Brina. I would just add too that the emotion Becca described for her own vaccine last Wednesday, when the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice approved it for 12-year-olds, the pediatricians, we have a surprising number of pediatricians in Vermont with 12-year-old children. It was amazing. And they all signed up that evening and the next morning. Many of them were able to get their children vaccinated that day. And that brought tears to all of us, like that, because of the early slide that Dr. Rubin presented about our children's mental health. So when you really take the pause to think about the last 14 months in our lives, my head and heart goes to the 12-year-olds and 13 and 14-year-olds, because it's like 1/12 of their life was taken into this isolation, whereas for me, it's 1/55th, right? It's a very compressed, important developmental time that just occurred. And but I really want you to feel comfortable with the dialogue. And, we're big proponents of finding those trusted medical people for you to have the conversation with, either in this forum, which we're really glad you're here, but also if you want to do it more in the one-on-one setting with your child's pediatrician. I think you'd find that to be a really open and valuable process. The waiting for me, as Dr. Rubin described, the data about the trials in 12-year-olds is unbelievable in terms of the safety and the fact that 100% of them developed antibodies. Like, we won't have anything like that forever. It's just a really well-studied vaccine. So I don't think we're going to find out in 3 months there was something different. So I don't think the science will help you in 3 months, but maybe just your process and your decision-making will, need a little bit more time. I totally respect that.
Yeah, the scientists were really pleasantly surprised about the effectiveness of these vaccines. There are no other vaccines that are close to it. I mean, again, we always recommend the flu vaccine. The flu vaccine is like, in a good year, maybe 40%. I mean, and we always tell people it's still worth it because, you know, even if you get the flu, at least you're not winding up in the hospital or from it. But this is, I mean, they hit a home run with this vaccine. I mean, it's amazing that it's terrific. And, you know, I think your daughter, I mean, talk to her. I'm sure you are talking with her, but, you know, I think that's a good thing that she wants it.
Yeah, I also want to acknowledge, though, and sorry we're spending so much time, Sarah, if you feel on the spot, but I love the way our health commissioner and our governor talk about Vermont and not stigmatizing decisions and behaviors. And, you know, we have a lot ahead as a state in the next few months about who's wearing a mask, who isn't, are we indoors, are we outdoors? And I just want us to all respect each other. And so if your daughter's feeling pressure about that, that's concerning to me. I think your community needs to understand we're all on our own paths and to support each other and not do more to split us. So I heard you say that with the sticker on the phone. That really, it's hard enough to be 12 without that kind of us and them thing that's going on. So I just wanted you to know I heard that. And then we have Anna McCoy on the phone. She just chatted into me directly in the chat. She's a physician here in Rutland. I like to say here as though we're physically together. And she just wanted to comment that we really, in terms of vaccinology, vaccines, that childhood vaccines do not have long-term negative side effects. So that's a good reminder that despite the COVID vaccine being new, we don't have experience with any of the technologies for vaccinating children leading to long-term effects. So we really do. Pediatricians love to talk about vaccines. It's fun. And the other thing that we love is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice, that group at the CDC. We actually know those people because most of them are pediatric. That's not well known in the news, but it is our special little secret. Those are our people.
If no one else has a question, I have a second question.
Sure.
I heard what I thought might be false news, so I thought I'd ask this question. Regarding the efficacy and the 100% that they saw, someone had told me that children with autoimmune disorders of any form have seen less efficacy, that, you know, not the 100%. And I wondered if that was false news or if that was something that they're watching.
So I don't know specifically for autoimmune. There are other immune, basically immune deficiencies, either from something that you have as a disease that you got, basically, or it could be even from a regimen that you're on for another illness. So if you have Crohn's disease or something like that, and you're on an immune modulator, you may be immunosuppressed. So it is true that we don't know, for people who have an altered immune system, whether that the vaccine is as helpful, I would put it that way, but it's all still recommended. Okay, there's no group that they say don't get it. They just don't know whether it's going to be as effective. That is true. There is no great way to know either. So you can't necessarily do an antibody 3 weeks later and say I'm okay or I'm not okay. They just don't know. So even if you have even if you did get tested, so they don't know right now. That doesn't mean that they won't ever know. But they all say that it is still worth doing that. So autoimmune, I'm not sure 100%. There may be some other factors, but that's not really part of the the efficacy. The efficacy was from that group that they did. That doesn't mean that everybody is going, it's 100% effective, efficacy for everyone. But yes, there are some, and that is actually part of the dialogue around, I guess you alluded to this about wearing masks or not, in that people that are that have these conditions may have to take more precautions anyway. So they may not be able to take off their masks when they're indoors with, even though they've been vaccinated. That may, and they, you know, they reckon. I mean, I have a relative who has that and knows that they are probably going to need to be cautious for a while until we know more about the vaccines. That doesn't mean the vaccine is not good. It just means people's immune systems, you know, it can't work, you know, for, yeah.
Great, thank you again.
Sure. What other questions? Anything you've been hearing from others that you know, you want to ask? Now's the time.
I'll ask a third question.
Well,
if that's okay. I'm going to ask this for a friend, actually. She's,
Good.
she's wondering if it affects the reproductive system at all, and if her teenage daughter should be getting the vaccine.
Okay, so all of the answer is no. All of this, you know, there basically was some, you know, unfounded claims that about fertility, both in, you know, males and females, and it's they've been disproven as much as they can be, but there's been no reports of this. They weren't, there's no, been, with all the millions and millions, you know, of doses that have been given, there's no reports. So the answer is no, it does not affect puberty. It doesn't affect anything, you know, and menstrual periods, it does not. I will tell you that there, you know, just in terms of the source of that information, you know, we were on a call, the AAP call, with one of the experts from the infectious disease experts, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, which is, you know, our parent chapter, a parent organization, and they mentioned there's, you know, a particular organization which puts out some falsehoods and likes to stir them around. And as a matter of fact, there, I think Bonnie Maldonado was the expert, and she was actually on CNN probably in the last week discussing it as well, and said, you know what, this whole thing goes around every time there's a new vaccine, they talk about it. So things, you know, get generated and propagated, but the answer really is no. Yeah, Bonnie Maldonado is one of the people on what's called the Red Book, which is our sort of Bible of infectious disease in pediatric infectious disease. And she is just an expert on this. And she was just mentioning, because we have, you know, we have all these calls among ourselves all the time. And we just had one last Thursday where we talked about it.
Thank you. Pass on the information. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Anything else?
Well, while we're wrapping up,
Good.
I just wanted to say hi to Stephanie Winters. We have been blessed with our incredible executive director, American Academy of Pediatrics. Nice chance for me publicly to thank Stephanie for all the hard work behind setting up these town halls on these beautiful spring evenings. We are closing in on time. We're so glad you joined us. Big thanks to Dr. Rubin, our transplanted New Jersey Vermonter. We will teach you, Dr. Rubin, no one's a Vermonter unless, I think it's 7 generations. You have to, Stephanie might know.
I don't know, but I am originally from Vermont, and I think we go back like 7 generations. So, but yes,
Yeah.
it's very rare.
We're so glad you're here, but you know, you're a visitor, as we all are, until you've been here for decades. Thanks for your time tonight, everyone.
Thank you very
I
much.
really know your pediatric colleagues they really want to continue this dialogue. We're ready to do this together. So keep the questions coming.
Thank you
Thanks
so
so
much,
much.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.